The icy water closed over my head, and in that moment of desperation, I saw it all clearly. Sue's love, her loyalty, it all belonged to another. I was just a placeholder, a convenient substitute for the man who truly held her heart. The crisp mountain air whipped at my face as I stood on the riverbank watching Sue and she laughing as they skipped stones across the water. She, her first love, the man who still held a piece of her heart, even after all these years. I'd been a fool to agree to this trip, a fool to believe that Sue's invitation was anything more than a thinly veiled attempt to rekindle their old flame. But here I was, the third wheel, the unwanted guest at their little reunion. "Zhao, come join us," Sue called, her voice echoing across the water. I forced a smile, plastering on a facade of nonchalance. "I'm good here," I replied, my voice a little too tight. She smirked, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and malice. "Scared of getting your feet wet, Zhao?" he taunted. "Don't be ridiculous," I retorted, my pride stung. "I just prefer to admire the view from a safe distance." Famous last words, right? Because not 5 minutes later, I found myself tumbling headfirst into the icy water along with she, courtesy of a misplaced tree root and his own clumsiness. The shock of the cold stole my breath, the current pulling me under. I surfaced, gasping for air, my limbs flailing in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. "She!" I heard Sue scream. "I'll save you!" And she, the athletic, capable she, was acting like a damsel in distress. Instead, it was Sue who plunged into the water, her strong arms cutting through the current with practiced ease. She reached she first, hauling him to the safety of the riverbank. He coughed and sputtered, clinging to her like a lifeline. "Sue," I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Help!" She turned, her eyes widening in alarm. But before she could reach me, Ji grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Don't, Sue," he said, his voice urgent. "You're too tired. You'll drown too." "But Zhao." "He'll be fine," she insisted, his eyes fixed on mine, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "He's a strong swimmer, isn't he?" Strong swimmer? I was barely treading water. Panic clawed at my throat, the icy water closing in. Sue hesitated, her gaze flitting between she and me. And then she made her choice. "He pushed me, Sue," Ji cried, his voice laced with feigned panic. "He tried to drown me." Sue's eyes widened in horror. "Zhao!" she gasped, her voice filled with accusation. "How could you? How could I?" The absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh. But the laughter died in my throat as I felt myself sinking, the current dragging me down. This was it, I thought, a strange sense of calm washing over me. This was how it ended, betrayed by the woman I loved, drowned in a cold, unforgiving river. And then, a miracle. A strong arm reached out, pulling me back from the brink. A stranger, a kind, concerned face, hauling me to safety. I coughed and sputtered, clinging to my rescuer like a lifeline. As I lay on the riverbank, shivering and exhausted, I watched Sue and she walking away, their arms wrapped around each other, their laughter echoing in the distance. And in that moment, I knew. I knew that I had lost her, that our marriage was nothing but a sham, a cruel illusion shattered by the icy waters of betrayal. The shivering wouldn't stop. It started as a subtle tremor after that icy plunge, but by the time we reached the hotel, it had escalated into a full-blown teeth-chattering symphony. My head throbbed, my limbs ached, and a wave of nausea rolled over me. Fantastic. Just fantastic. Not only had I been publicly humiliated and left to drown by my own wife, but now I was apparently coming down with a fever. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb with cold. "Sue," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. I need some medicine." Her response was swift, sharp, and utterly devoid of sympathy. "Are you kidding me, Zhao? You're not actually sick, are you? Don't try to pull that sick husband routine to ruin my time with Xi." "Ruin your time?" I choked out, disbelief warring with the rising fever. Sue, I'm freezing. I can barely stand, and you think I'm faking it? Well, it wouldn't be the first time, would it? She retorted, her voice laced with accusation. Remember that time I planned a weekend getaway with my friends and you suddenly developed a migraine? The memory stung. I had been genuinely sick that time, but Sue, ever suspicious, had dismissed it as a ploy to control her. And now history was repeating itself. But this time, it wasn't a weekend getaway she was trying to protect. It was her time with she. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, the fever suddenly a secondary concern. Just as I was about to give up and resign myself to a night of shivering misery, a knock on the door startled me. Ruby, my college friend, my confidant, the one person who had always seen through my bullshit and loved me anyway. Zhao, what the hell happened? She exclaimed, rushing to my side. She'd seen my desperate plea for help on social media, and bless her loyal heart, she'd driven all the way from the city to check on me. Ruby, I started, but the words caught in my throat. The fever was making my head spin, the room tilting around me. Don't worry, I got you, she said, her voice soothing. She bustled around the room, fetching me medicine, blankets, and those cooling patches that magically stick to your forehead. Within minutes, I was tucked into bed, feeling marginally less like death warmed over. And then the door burst open. So, her eyes widened in fury as she took in the scene. Me, tucked in bed, Ruby fussing over me with a concerned frown. Who is this? She demanded, her voice dripping with suspicion. What's going on here? This is Ruby, my friend, I mumbled, my head pounding. She's just helping me. Helping you? Sue scoffed, her eyes narrowing. Or helping herself? The accusation hung in the air, thick with insinuation. Ruby, bless her fiery soul, didn't miss a beat. I'm helping him because he's sick, you moron, she retorted, her voice laced with righteous anger. And unlike some people, I actually care about his well-being. Sue sputtered, speechless for once. I watched the exchange, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. This was my life now. A twisted soap opera filled with betrayal, accusations, and misplaced priorities. And as I drifted off to sleep, lulled by the sound of Ruby's soothing voice and the cool touch of the fever patch on my forehead, I couldn't help but wonder how I had ended up here. How had my marriage become such a twisted, tangled mess? And was there any way to salvage it, or was it time to finally cut my losses and walk away? The fever haze had retreated, leaving behind a throbbing headache and a bone-deep weariness. But even in my weakened state, I couldn't ignore the tension crackling in the room. Sue stood frozen, her face a mask of confusion and guilt. Ruby, ever the fearless one, glared at her with a righteous indignation. Seriously, Sue? Ruby scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. You accuse me of being his mistress when he's clearly burning up with fever? You've lost your mind. I... Sue stammered, her eyes darting nervously between Ruby and me. I didn't know. She said. Ruby interrupted, her voice rising. And you just blindly believe everything that man says? What kind of marriage is this, Sue? Where you trust your first love more than your own husband? Sue flinched, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. It's not like that, she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. Then what is it like, Sue? Ruby pressed, her eyes boring into her. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair with that man, and you're perfectly happy to let your husband suffer while you're out gallivanting with him. Sue's face paled, her lips trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I watched the exchange, a strange mix of anger and sadness swirling within me. Was this really my wife? The woman who had vowed to love and cherish me in sickness and in health? The woman who was now standing before me, speechless and ashamed, unable to defend her own actions? Just then, the door creaked open and she walked in, a plastic bag dangling from his hand. I got the medicine, he announced, his voice laced with feigned concern. How's he doing? Oh, he's just peachy, Ruby retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Thanks to you and your little late-night outing, he's been burning up with fever all night. But don't worry, your conscience is clear, right? Xi's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Xi, Ruby snapped. I saw you two leaving the hotel last night, all dressed up and giggling like teenagers. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you were just working late. The color drained from Xi's face, his carefully constructed facade cracking. He glanced at Sue, his eyes pleading for help. But Sue just stood there, her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet his eyes. I watched the scene unfold, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. It was like watching a play, a tragicomedy with a cast of characters I barely recognized. And as the tension in the room reached a fever pitch, I made a decision. Ruby, I said, my voice firm, I think you should stay here tonight, just to be safe. She hesitated, her eyes filled with concern. Are you sure, Zhao? I don't want to cause any trouble. You're not causing trouble, I insisted. You're helping me, and I need you here. She nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. Okay, Zhao, I'll stay. She glared at me, his eyes burning with resentment. But I didn't care. I had made my choice. I was done with the lies, the betrayal, the toxic relationships. It was time to start protecting the people who actually cared about me. And Ruby, my loyal, fearless friend, was at the top of that list. The fever finally broke. Gone were the chills, the aches, the delirious haze that had clouded my mind. In its place was a steely resolve, a burning anger fueled by Sue's betrayal and Xi's manipulative tactics. I knew I couldn't just lie here and let them walk all over me. It was time to fight back. Sue's project, the one Xi had so conveniently tagged along for, involved some high-tech equipment, sensitive and ridiculously expensive. Naturally, they needed help lugging it around. And who better to exploit than the useless husband currently recuperating in the hotel? Zhao, darling, Sue chirped, her voice dripping with false concern. Feeling up to helping us out today? Just some light lifting, nothing strenuous? I almost laughed. Light lifting? With these two? I knew it was a trap, but I played along, a plan forming in my mind. Sure, I said, feigning a weary smile. Anything for my lovely wife and her colleague? The work was tedious, involving endless trips to and from the truck, carefully maneuvering bulky equipment through narrow corridors. As I huffed and puffed, pretending to struggle, I kept my ears open, listening for any slip-up, any hint of their true intentions. And then, I heard it. A hushed conversation just around the corner. Sue and Xi, their voices low and conspiratorial. Are you sure this will work? Sue whispered, her voice laced with doubt. Of course it will, Xi hissed. He's an idiot. He'll fall for anything. But what if he gets hurt? He won't, Xi scoffed. It's just a little accident. Besides, we need the money. That equipment is worth a fortune. I know, but... No buts, Sue, Xi interrupted, his voice hardening. We need to do this. For us. For our future. My blood ran cold. They were planning to sabotage the equipment, to make it look like an accident, and then blame me for the damage. And for what? Money? To fund their little love nest? The audacity of it all was breathtaking. I retreated, my heart pounding in my chest. Anger, hot and consuming, coursed through my veins. They were going to pay for this. They were going to pay dearly. The air crackled with tension as we maneuvered the last piece of equipment, a monstrously heavy sensor array, towards the truck. I could feel their eyes on me, their anticipation palpable. Showtime. Careful, Zhao, Xi said, his voice laced with mock concern. Wouldn't want you to drop it? Wouldn't dream of it, I replied, my grip tightening on the sensor array. It was awkward, bulky, and definitely not designed for one-handed carrying, which was precisely their plan. Xi, with a theatrical flourish, bent down to tie his shoelace, conveniently bumping my arm as he did so. The sensor array wobbled precariously. I stumbled but didn't let go. Nice try, buddy. Whoa there, Zhao, Xi exclaimed, feigning surprise. Almost had a disaster there, didn't we? Almost, I agreed, my voice tight. But luckily, I've got a firm grip. Sue, ever the supportive partner, chimed in, "Yes, Sal, be careful. This equipment is very expensive. We wouldn't want you to be responsible for any damages." Wouldn't want that, I echoed, my eyes narrowing. Which is why I'm being extra cautious. The game continued for another agonizing minute, a tense dance of feigned concern and thinly veiled threats. And then my opportunity arose. As she reached for the sensor array, I tripped, my foot catching on a conveniently placed rock. I stumbled, my grip loosening just enough. She, caught off guard, fumbled the sensor array. It slipped from his grasp, crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. Silence. A stunned, horrified silence. Then Sao's shriek shattered the stillness. The equipment, it's broken. She stared at the mangled remains of the sensor array, his face pale with shock. I, on the other hand, couldn't suppress a smirk. Gotcha. Oops, I said, feigning innocence. Looks like someone needs to be more careful. The satisfaction was immense, a delicious cocktail of revenge and triumph. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a fool, but I had turned the tables, outsmarted them at their own game. And this, I knew, was just the beginning. The aftermath was a symphony of chaos. Sue's shriek had drawn a crowd, curious onlookers gawking at the shattered remains of the sensor array. She sputtered, desperately trying to deflect blame, while Sue, bless her predictable heart, launched into a tirade of accusations. "Sao, how could you be so careless?" she screeched, her voice shrill with indignation. "This equipment is worth a fortune. You'll have to pay for this." "Me," I feigned surprise, raising an eyebrow. "But I didn't drop it. She did the—" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "You were the one holding it. You tripped. You fumbled. I tripped?" I interrupted, my voice dangerously calm. "Interesting, because I seem to recall someone bumping into me, conveniently distracting me just as the equipment slipped." Xi's face paled. I was just trying to help," he stammered, his voice cracking. "By sabotaging the equipment and framing me for the damage?" I retorted, my voice laced with steel. "How thoughtful of you." The crowd murmured, their gazes shifting between us. Sue, sensing the shift in the power dynamic, faltered. "Zhao, don't be absurd," she pleaded, her voice softening. "We're a team. We need to work together to fix this." "A team?" I scoffed. "You and she, while I'm conveniently left holding the bag? I don't think so." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Fortunately," I said, a smug grin spreading across my face, "I have a dash cam in my car, and I'm pretty sure it captured the entire incident. From Xi's accidental bump to his dramatic fumble." The color drained from Xi's face. Sue stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. The crowd, sensing a juicy drama unfolding, leaned in, their anticipation palpable. "So," I continued, my voice dripping with satisfaction, "unless you want this footage to go viral, I suggest you two start figuring out how you're going to pay for the damages. Because I'm certainly not footing the bill for your little scheme." I watched them squirm, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. The satisfaction was immense, a heady mix of revenge and triumph. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a fool. But I had outsmarted them, exposed their lies, and shifted the power dynamic in my favor. And this, I knew, was just the beginning of their downfall. The stunned silence that followed my dashcam revelation was glorious. She looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, while Sue's carefully crafted mask of composure was cracking faster than cheap paint on a scorching summer day. Time to deliver the final blow. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice deceptively casual. "I believe I'll be canceling that supplementary credit card you've been enjoying, Sue. Wouldn't want you using my hard-earned money to fund your extracurricular activities." Her eyes widened in panic. "You can't do that," she sputtered. "That's our money." "Our money," I scoffed. "The money I earned while you were gallivanting with your first love? The money you were planning to use to cover up his screw-up?" I don't think so. I pulled out my phone and with a few swift taps deactivated her card. The satisfaction was akin to downing a perfectly chilled glass of lemonade on a sweltering day. Pure bliss. Goodbye, Sue, I said, my voice cold and final. Enjoy cleaning up this mess you've created. I'm sure she will be a great help. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. As I drove back to Beijing, a sense of liberation washed over me. It was over. The lies, the betrayal, the constant emotional drain. I was free. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from Sue, each one more desperate than the last. I ignored them all. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. When I reached home, I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. Then, I contacted my lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings. There was no turning back. This chapter of my life was closed. As I packed my bags for a much-needed escape to Europe with my parents, I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but it was a new beginning. A chance to rediscover myself, to heal, to find happiness on my own terms. And as I boarded the plane, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage, I felt a sense of excitement, a sense of anticipation for the adventures that lay ahead. The crisp autumn air of Beijing was a welcome change from the lingering summer warmth of Europe. My month-long trip had been a whirlwind of sights, sounds, and culinary delights, a much-needed escape from the wreckage of my marriage. But as I stepped off the plane, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. It was time to face the music, to finalize the divorce, to sever the last ties to Sue. My phone, silent for the past month, exploded with a barrage of notifications the moment I turned it on. Missed calls, frantic texts, desperate voicemails, all from Sue. The sheer volume of her attempts to contact me was overwhelming, a testament to the depth of her desperation. But my resolve remained firm. There was no going back. A message from a mutual friend, however, caught my attention. It painted a grim picture of Xi's downfall. Apparently, he'd resorted to loan sharks to pay for the damaged equipment, a desperate gamble that had backfired spectacularly. He was now drowning in debt, harassed by creditors, his life spiraling out of control. Sue, ostracized by my friends and family, was left to deal with the fallout alone. A flicker of... what was it? Pity? Schadenfreude? I couldn't quite decipher the complex emotions swirling within me. Anger, yes, a burning anger at their betrayal and their callous disregard for my well-being. But also a tinge of sadness, a lingering regret for the life we could have had. The future we could have built together. If only... I pushed those thoughts aside. Dwelling on the past was pointless. It was time to move on. I called Sue, my voice devoid of emotion. "We need to talk," I said. "I'm filing for divorce." Her response was predictable, a torrent of apologies, excuses, and desperate pleas for another chance. I listened patiently, letting her words wash over me. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke. "Sue," I said, my voice calm but firm, "it's over. Your actions, your choices, have made that abundantly clear. There's no trust left, no foundation to rebuild upon." "But Zhao, I love you," she cried, her voice cracking. "I made a mistake. I was foolish, but I never stopped loving you." "Love," I scoffed. "Is that what you call it? Betraying me, lying to me, conspiring with another man to harm me? That's not love, Sue. That's something else entirely." "But she is not the issue here, Sue," I interrupted, my voice hardening. "The issue is you. Your lack of loyalty, your willingness to throw away our marriage for a fleeting infatuation. I don't know who you are anymore, Sue. The woman I married wouldn't have done this to me." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. And then, a choked sob. I'm so sorry, Zhao," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted..." "You just wanted what, Sue?" I pressed, my voice laced with a mixture of anger and sadness. You just wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You just wanted to relive your teenage romance without sacrificing your comfortable life with me? Another sob. Then, a desperate plea. Please, Zhao, don't leave me. I'll do anything. I'll change. It's too late, Sue, I said, my voice heavy with regret. The damage is done. The trust is broken. And I can't keep living like this, constantly wondering when the next betrayal will come. I paused, taking a deep breath. I have something to play for you, I said, my voice turning cold. Something that might clarify a few things. I pressed play on the recording, the sound of Sue and she's conspiratorial whispers filling the room. Her face paled, her eyes widening in horror as she listened to her own words, her own betrayal laid bare. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. She looked at me, her eyes filled with shame and regret. And in that moment, I knew that there was no turning back. This was the end. I understand, she whispered, her voice broken. I'll sign the papers. And with that, our marriage was over. The sterile atmosphere of the Civil Affairs Bureau was a fitting backdrop for the final act of this drama. Sue, dressed in somber gray, stood beside me, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. A last-ditch attempt at reconciliation, a tearful apology whispered in the hallway, a desperate plea for forgiveness. I listened, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Pity warred with anger, regret tangled with relief. But my resolve remained firm. Some wounds, once inflicted, could never truly heal. It's over, Sue, I said, my voice gentle but firm. We both need to move on. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. The official, a stern-faced woman with an air of bored efficiency, processed the paperwork, her stamp marking the end of our union. As I signed my name on the dotted line, a strange sense of detachment washed over me. It was done. The chapter closed, the book finished, a new story awaited. We stepped out of the building, the harsh sunlight a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere within. And then, it happened. A blur of motion, a flash of metal, a searing pain in my chest. I stumbled, my hand instinctively flying to the wound. Blood, warm and sticky, seeped between my fingers. Shock. Disbelief. Then, a surge of fear, cold and paralyzing. I looked up, my vision blurring, desperately trying to identify my attacker. She. His face contorted with rage, his eyes burning with a hatred that chilled me to the bone. He lunged again, the knife glinting menacingly in the sunlight. She! No! Sue screamed, her voice laced with panic. But it was too late. The blade plunged into my chest, a searing pain that stole my breath. I collapsed, the world tilting, darkness closing in. You! I gasped, my voice a ragged whisper. Sue, accomplice. And then, oblivion. The hospital room was bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. I lay in bed, my chest still aching, the scars a stark reminder of that fateful day. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional wounds, the deep-seated betrayal that had shattered my world. It had been a long road to recovery, a grueling journey of physical therapy, counseling, and countless sleepless nights haunted by nightmares of that fateful encounter. She, sentenced to life imprisonment for attempted murder, was a distant boogeyman, his threat neutralized. Sue, my former wife, my betrayer, was serving 10 years, her pleas for forgiveness echoing hollowly in the sterile courtroom. But I had survived. Scarred, yes, but not broken. The experience had stripped me bare, forcing me to confront my own vulnerabilities, my own misplaced trust. It had been a painful lesson, but a valuable one. I had emerged from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more cautious. I looked out the window at the bustling city below, a symbol of life, of resilience, of endless possibilities. The past was a ghost, a shadow that no longer held power over me. I was free to forge my own path, to create my own happiness, to embrace the future with open arms. A knock on the door startled me. Ruby. Her smile was warm, her eyes filled with a concern that touched my heart. She had been my rock throughout this ordeal, her unwavering support a lifeline in the darkest of times. "Ready for your walk?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, a genuine smile spreading across my face. We strolled through the hospital gardens, the fresh air and sunshine a balm to my weary soul. As we rounded a corner, I saw her. A woman, her back turned towards us, her long hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of sunlight. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at my memory. She turned, and our eyes met. A spark, a flicker of recognition, a hint of something more. A smile played on her lips, a smile that mirrored my own. "Hello," she said, her voice soft and melodious. "I believe we haven't met." "No," I replied, my heart quickening with a newfound hope. "I don't believe we have." And as we stood there, bathed in the golden light of a new dawn, I knew that my story wasn't over. It was just beginning.